The Langobards, or Lombards, were a Germanic people originally from the lower Elbe River region in modern-day northern Germany. They later migrated southward, establishing a powerful kingdom in Italy during the early Middle Ages. Their history, culture, and contributions provide fascinating insights into early medieval Europe. The Lombards were first mentioned in Roman sources as a Suevic tribe in the 1st century CE. By the 6th century, they had migrated southwards through Central Europe, eventually conquering much of the Italian Peninsula after the collapse of the Western Roman Empire. Their migration culminated in the establishment of the Kingdom of the Lombards, 568 to 774 CE, centered in northern Italy, where they ruled until they were conquered by Charlemagne and incorporated into the Carolingian Empire. Lombard architecture evolved significantly after their arrival in Italy. While initially influenced by their Germanic traditions, they adopted Roman and Byzantine architectural styles. The Lombards converted to Christianity, which influenced their architectural projects. Their churches often merged Romanesque and Byzantine elements. A notable example is the Basilica of San Salvatore in Spoleto. The Lombards constructed and fortified cities, incorporating Roman techniques into their defenses. Cities like Pavia and Benevento were significant centers of Lombard influence. They often repurposed Roman ruins, incorporating columns and reliefs into their new constructions. Initially, the Lombards were hostile to the Eastern Roman Empire, taking advantage of its weakening grip on Italy after the Gothic War, 535 to 554 CE. Over time, they adopted Roman administrative practices and Christianity, blending Roman and Germanic traditions. Early Lombard pottery was utilitarian, handmade, and decorated with simple incised or stamped patterns. After settling in Italy, their pottery became influenced by Roman techniques, including wheel-thrown production and glazed finishes. For this video, I have gathered the raw DNA of 8 Pannonian Lombards from Hungary. With PCA-based ethnicity calculators, they resemble the Dutch and Danes, a testament to their North German origins. I ran the 8 DNA samples through my trait predictor tool for DNA analysis. 5 of the 8 samples were male, and of those 5 samples, 2 carried the Y lineage I2A. The remaining 3 carried Y lineage R1B. Regarding phenotypes, the most common phenotypes among the group were Baltid, North Atlantid, and Hallstatt. Here is a morph of the average predicted phenotype. The most common eye color was blue, but there were samples with hazel and even one sample with brown eyes, although there weren't any samples with dark brown eye color. The most common hair color by far was dark blonde, with the remaining being dark and light brown. No samples scored red, light blonde, or black hair colors. The most common predicted skin color among the Lombards was white, with one sample scoring palest skin as its predicted skin tone and one sample scoring olive skin. Surprisingly, not a single sample scored straight hair as their predicted hair texture, although straight hair is a common Germanic trait. 5 samples were predicted to have curly hair, 2 were predicted to have wavy hair, and 1 was even predicted to have kinky hair texture. The samples were evenly split on the nose shapes, with 4 samples having Greek and 4 samples having snub nose shapes. Surprisingly, these early Germans also had low predisposition to male pattern hair loss. This is surprising because Europeans generally don't carry the alleles that protect from baldness. They were roughly evenly split on height, with 4 individuals being predicted to be taller and 4 individuals shorter than average. The Lombards had a low predisposition to kidney stones, with 3 samples scoring low for odds of kidney stones. 4 samples were carriers and scored high for odds of hemoglobin E disease. 4 samples had low odds of migraine. Every sample had average odds of lupus, 2 samples had low odds of gout, and 1 sample had low odds of eczema. 4 samples had low odds of polycystic ovary syndrome. 3 samples had low odds of age-related cataracts, and 2 samples had high odds of age-related macular degeneration. 4 samples had low odds of epilepsy, 1 sample had high odds of asthma, and 1 sample had low odds of vitiligo. 3 samples had low odds of myopia, 3 samples had low odds of corneal astigmatism, and 4 samples had high odds of primary biliary cirrhosis. Regarding the warrior versus worrier trait, the Lombards were strongly predisposed to higher dopamine levels and slower dopamine reuptake. For samples were predicted to be warriors, and no samples were predicted to be warriors. 3 samples were predicted to have fewer D2 receptor sites, and no samples were predisposed to more D2 receptor sites. Overall, the Lombards were predisposed to lower odds of schizophrenia and bipolar, and higher odds of no-go learning. They had low odds of Tourette's, ADHD, average odds of depression, and low odds of bipolar 1 as a group. The Lombards were strongly predisposed to autism as a group. 5 samples scored high for autism risk, and only 1 sample scored low. 6 out of 8 samples were lactase persistent. The Lombards were predisposed to average levels of empathy, with 3 samples scoring higher empathy and 2 samples scoring lower empathy on the basis of OXDR genotypes. Moving on to athleticism, the C allele in ACTN3's R577X was overrepresented among the Lombards, suggesting that they were more athletic as a group than Europeans or East Asians. The Lombards were predisposed to intermediate odds of epithelial cancers on the basis of 8q24 genotypes. The Lombards had roughly average overall predisposition to breast cancer, high predisposition to glioma, average predisposition to thyroid cancer, and high predisposition to testicular cancer on the basis of KITLG genotypes. Moving on to blood cancers, 3 Lombards had a high predisposition to leukemia, and 1 sample had a high predisposition to polycythemia vera on the basis of JAK2 genotypes. The Lombards had typical predisposition to allergies, and 6 of them carried risk variants for rare conditions. The most common rare condition was Parkinson's, which 4 people carried risk variants for. The Lombards had a predisposition to intermediate levels of plasma homocysteine. 1 sample had low odds of ischemic stroke, 2 samples had high odds of atrial fibrillation, every sample had average odds of deep vein thrombosis, and 1 sample had very high odds of cardiovascular issues. The Lombards had average odds of autoimmune disease on the basis of HLA genotypes. 3 samples carried alleles for elevated risk of ankylosing spondylitis. 3 samples had high odds of type 1 diabetes. 3 samples had high odds of rheumatoid arthritis, and 4 samples had very high odds of multiple sclerosis and carried HLA-DRB1 risk variants for MS. The Lombards were predisposed to lower red blood cell count, shorter telomere lengths, which leads to shorter biological lifespan and good iron levels. No samples carried hemochromatosis variants or were predisposed to hemochromatosis. However, 1 sample did have low iron levels approaching anemia. The Lombards were predisposed to average risk of alcohol dependence and lower risk of syncope. The Lombards had higher levels of vitamin D with the exception of 1 sample and average levels of LDL cholesterol. The most common blood types among the Lombards was O, which 6 people carried, but 1 person was also predicted to carry blood type A, and 1 person was also predicted to carry the rare blood type AB. Thank you for watching until the end. Links to all the relevant data will be in the description. Make sure to leave a like and share if you enjoyed the video. Goodbye.